The child labor auction in Galveston was ending when rancher Samuel McKinnon saw her. A frail girl of 14 with eyes that held secrets darker than the Texas night. He paid $50, not knowing that this broken child would become the key to saving his dying ranch, his barren marriage, and his own tortured soul. What happened next would shake the very foundations of the Wild West. Before we get into the story, many of our repeated viewers mentioned concerns about script quality, so we've brought in a new writer. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Help us grow, and thank you for being here. Samuel McKinnon stood at the back of the crowded warehouse, his weathered hands gripping his hat as he watched the sorry parade of children being sold like cattle. The year 1887 had been harsh on Texas, and desperate families were making desperate choices. Some sold their young ones to factories, others to farms, all hoping their children might find better lives than the poverty that had claimed their own. At 42, Samuel owned one of the largest cattle ranches in Brazos County, but prosperity felt hollow when shared with no one. His wife Martha had been trying to bear children for 15 years, and each failed attempt had carved deeper lines into both their faces. The ranch hands whispered behind his back. What good was a man who couldn't even father an heir? The auctioneer's voice cut through his thoughts. Next, we have a girl, age 14, healthy and strong, been working in the cotton field since she was 8, good with animals, can read and write some. Samuel looked up to see a thin girl being pushed onto the makeshift platform. Her brown hair hung in tangles around a face that might have been pretty if not for the hollow cheeks and dark circles under her eyes. Her dress was little more than rags, patched and repatched until the original fabric was barely visible. But it was her eyes that caught him. They weren't the vacant stare he'd seen in the other children. These eyes burned with a fierce intelligence, darting around the room as if calculating every exit, every face, every possibility. Bidding starts at $20. The auctioneer called 25, called a man near the front. Samuel recognized him. Thomas Briggs, who owned a small farm north of town. Briggs was known for working his help near to death. 30 came another voice. Samuel found himself stepping forward before he'd made a conscious decision. $50. The warehouse fell silent. $50 was more than most of these children would earn in 2 years of labor. The auctioneer's eyes lit up with greed. $50 from the gentleman in back. Do I hear 60? The silence stretched. No one was fool enough to bid against Samuel McKinnon when he'd made up his mind about something. Sold to Mr. McKinnon for $50. As Samuel made his way to the front to complete the transaction, he caught the girl's eye. Instead of the gratitude or fear he expected, he saw something that made him pause. Pity. This child, who had just been sold like a piece of livestock, was looking at him with pity. The auctioneer handed him a piece of paper with the girl's details. Name's Rebecca Sullivan. Parents died of fever last winter. She's been living rough since then. You got yourself a good worker there, Mr. McKinnon. Samuel folded the paper and approached the girl. Up close, he could see she was even thinner than she'd appeared on the platform. Her wrists were like twigs, and her shoes had holes that let her toes peek through. Miss Sullivan, he said, touching the brim of his hat. I'm Samuel McKinnon. You'll be coming to work on my ranch. She studied his face for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was soft, but clear. What kind of work? General help around the house and grounds. My wife Martha will explain your duties, and if I don't want to come, the question surprised him. Most of the children he'd seen today had accepted their fate with resigned silence. You have a choice in the matter, but winter's coming, and the streets of Galveston ain't kind to young folks on their own. Rebecca looked around the warehouse at the remaining children still waiting to be sold, at the men with hungry eyes counting their coins. When she looked back at Samuel, something in her expression had shifted. I reckon I'll come with you then, Mr. McKinnon. The ride to the McKinnon ranch took most of the day. Samuel had brought his wagon, loaded with supplies from town, and Rebecca sat beside him on the bench seat as they traveled the dusty roads through East Texas countryside. She didn't speak much during the journey, but Samuel caught her watching everything. The way he handled the horses, the landmarks they passed, the position of the sun. This wasn't a child simply along for the ride. She was memorizing every detail of the route. You planning to run off? He asked after they'd been traveling for several hours. Depends, she replied without looking at him. On what? On whether you bought me to work or for other reasons. The quiet steel in her voice made Samuel's stomach clench. He pulled the wagon to a halt and turned to face her fully. Miss Sullivan, I want to be clear about something. You're coming to my ranch to help with honest work, cooking, cleaning, tending the animals. Nothing more. Any man who would harm a child deserves to be strung up, and I include myself in that judgment. She studied his face again with those unnervingly mature eyes. Finally, she nodded. All right, then. They rode in more comfortable silence. After that, as the sun began to set, they crested a hill, and Rebecca got her first look at the McKinnon Ranch. It sprawled across the valley below them like a small town. The main house was built of sturdy timber with a wraparound porch and dormer windows. A large barn stood to one side with several smaller outbuildings scattered around the property. Cattle dotted the pastures that stretched as far as the eye could see. It's bigger than I expected, Rebecca said softly. Took me 20 years to build it up, Samuel replied with quiet pride. Of course, it'll all belong to strangers when I'm gone, seeing as Martha and I haven't been blessed with children. Something flickered across Rebecca's face at those words, but she said nothing. As they pulled up to the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch. Martha McKinnon was still handsome at 38, with blonde hair only lightly touched with gray and a figure that spoke of good living. But there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested years of disappointment. Samuel, she called as he climbed down from the wagon. You're later than I expected. Had some business in town, he replied, then turned to help Rebecca down. Martha, this is Rebecca Sullivan. She'll be helping around the house. Martha's eyes widened as she took in the girl's ragged appearance. My lord, child, you look like you haven't had a proper meal in months. Probably hasn't, Samuel said. I was thinking she could have the small room off the kitchen. Nonsense, Martha said briskly. She'll have the spare bedroom upstairs. Come along, dear, let's get you cleaned up and fed. As Martha led Rebecca into the house, Samuel watched from the porch. He'd expected his wife to be pleased with the help, but there was something almost desperate in the way she'd taken charge of the girl. Inside, Martha was already bustling around the kitchen, heating water and pulling food from the pantry. Sit down, Rebecca. That is your name, isn't it? Such a pretty name. I had a sister named Rebecca once. Rebecca perched on the edge of a chair, her eyes taking in the warm kitchen with its polished wood surfaces and cheerful curtains. It's very nice here, Mrs. McKinnon. Oh, call me Martha, dear. We're not formal folk. Martha set a plate of bread and cold meat in front of her. Now eat up while I prepare a bath for you. As Rebecca ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, Martha chattered about the house, the ranch, the nearby town. But Samuel, watching from the doorway, noticed how his wife's hands shook slightly as she worked, and how her voice had a brittle quality he hadn't heard in years. When Rebecca had finished eating, Martha led her upstairs to the spare bedroom. It was simply furnished but clean and comfortable with a window that looked out over the ranch grounds. This will be your room, Martha said, smoothing the quilt on the bed. I'll bring you some proper clothes tomorrow. I think I have some things that might fit. Thank you, Rebecca said. I'm not used to such kindness. Martha's face crumpled for just a moment before she composed herself. Every child deserves kindness, dear. Now, let's get you that bath. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Rebecca proved to be everything the auctioneer had promised and more. She was up before dawn, helping Martha with breakfast for the ranch hands. She tended the vegetable garden with a skill that suggested years of experience. She could mend clothes, churn butter, and even help with the animals when needed. But it was her effect on Martha that Samuel found most remarkable. His wife, who had grown increasingly withdrawn over the years of failed pregnancies, seemed to come alive again. She spent hours teaching Rebecca to cook special dishes, showing her how to arrange flowers from the garden, even reading to her in the evenings. She's a bright girl, Martha told Samuel one evening as they sat on the porch. She learns everything so quickly. Maybe too quickly, Samuel replied, watching Rebecca in the distance as she helped one of the ranch hands doctor a lame horse. Sometimes I get the feeling she's older than her years. She's had to grow up fast, poor thing, but she's safe now. Samuel nodded, but something nagged at him. Rebecca worked hard and caused no trouble. But there were moments when he caught her watching the horizon with a calculating expression or noticed how she always seemed to know exactly where everyone was at any given time. One evening in October, he found her in the barn after supper sitting in the loft and staring out at the darkening sky. He climbed up to join her. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said. She glanced at him, then back at the sky. "I was thinking about my parents. The auctioneer said they died of fever." They did, but before that, they had dreams. P wanted to start his own farm someday. Ma wanted to learn to play the piano. She was quiet for a moment. "I wonder if I'll ever have dreams like that." "What kind of dreams would you have?" She considered the question seriously. "I think I'd like to learn to read better. Real books, not just the Bible. An almanac, and maybe learn about numbers, not just counting, but the kind of arithmetic that helps you figure out important things." Samuel was intrigued. What kind of important things, like how much cattle a ranch can support, how to tell if you're making money or losing it, how to plan for bad years? She looked at him directly. "How to make sure you never have to sell your children." The words hit him like a physical blow. In all his years of running the ranch, he'd never talked to anyone, not even Martha, about the financial side of the operation. Yet, this 14-year-old girl had somehow grasped that this knowledge was power. "I could teach you," he found himself saying. "If you're truly interested." Her eyes lit up. "You would. Reading, writing, arithmetic, the basics of running a ranch. But it would be in addition to your regular work, not instead of it." "I understand." And so began Rebecca's education. After the evening chores were done, she would join Samuel in his study, where he taught her to read from his collection of books and showed her how to work with numbers. She absorbed everything with a hunger that amazed him. Martha was delighted with the arrangement. "It's wonderful to see her learning," she told Samuel. "Every girl should have an education." But as autumn turned to winter, Samuel began to notice changes in both his wife and Rebecca. Martha had always been particular about Rebecca's appearance. But now she seemed almost obsessive about it. She ordered new dresses from town, spent hours brushing and arranging Rebecca's hair, and insisted on teaching her what she called proper manners. Rebecca submitted to all this attention with good grace. But Samuel sometimes caught her looking in the mirror with an expression that was hard to read. The first real test came in November when a late-season storm brought 3 days of freezing rain and wind. The ranch hands worked around the clock to bring the cattle to shelter and secure the buildings while Martha and Rebecca kept hot food and coffee flowing. On the second night, one of the newer hands, a young man named Jake Winters, cornered Rebecca in the kitchen while Martha was upstairs and Samuel was in the barn. "You're growing up real pretty," Jake said, moving closer than was proper. "Bet you're lonely sometimes, stuck out here with just old folks for company." Rebecca stepped back, but Jake followed. "Come on now, don't be shy. I could show you some fun." "I think you should go back to the bunkhouse," Rebecca said quietly. "Not until I get what I came for," Jake replied, reaching for her. He never saw the cast iron skillet coming. Rebecca's swing caught him square in the temple, dropping him to the kitchen floor like a sack of grain. He wasn't unconscious, but he was definitely seeing stars. "I said, go back to the bunkhouse," Rebecca repeated, still holding the skillet. Jake struggled to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "You little hellcat, you could have killed me." "Could have, didn't. Won't be so careful next time." Samuel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What's going on here?" He stood in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene. Jake holding his bleeding head. Rebecca with the skillet, the determination in her eyes. Jake started to bluster. "Mr. McKinnon, this girl attacked me." I know exactly what you were doing," Samuel said coldly. "Pack your gear. You're off this ranch tonight." "But Mr. McKinnon, it's storming out there. Should have thought of that before you decided to bother a child under my protection." Samuel's hand rested on the gun at his hip. "You've got 10 minutes to clear out or I'll drag you out myself." Jake looked from Samuel to Rebecca, saw no mercy in either face, and stumbled toward the door. "This ain't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," Samuel replied. After Jake had gone, Samuel turned to Rebecca. "You all right?" She nodded, setting down the skillet. "I'm sorry about the trouble. You have nothing to apologize for. You defended yourself, and you showed more restraint than I would have." He studied her face. Where did you learn to handle yourself like that? Living on the streets teaches you things, she said simply. Martha appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. When she heard what had happened, her face went pale with fury. That animal, she said. Thank God you're safe, Rebecca. But Samuel noticed how Martha's hands shook as she fussed over the girl, and how her eyes kept darting to the windows as if expecting more threats to appear. That night, after Rebecca had gone to bed, Martha came to Samuel's study where he was working on the ranch accounts. We need to talk, she said. Samuel looked up from his ledgers about what happened tonight about Rebecca. Martha sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. Samuel, we can't keep pretending she's just a hired girl. What do you mean? Look at her. Really look at her. She's turning into a beautiful young woman and we're two childless people who've grown far too attached. Martha's voice broke slightly. What happens when she decides to leave? What happens when some young man comes courting? Samuel sat down his pen. He'd been trying not to think about these very questions. She's only been here a few months, Martha. And in those few months, she's become the daughter we never had. Don't tell me you don't see it, too. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we make it official. We could adopt her. Martha. She's not an orphan. She was sold into labor. By who? The county. She has no family left, and she's clearly happy here. Martha leaned forward. Samuel, this could be our chance. The chance we've prayed for all these years. Samuel understood his wife's desperation, but something about the idea troubled him. We should ask Rebecca what she wants. Of course, but think about it. She'd have a real home, a real family. She'd inherit the ranch someday. Isn't that better than whatever uncertain future awaits her otherwise? That night, Samuel lay awake thinking about Martha's words. He'd grown fond of Rebecca. There was no denying it. She was bright, capable, and showed more understanding of ranch operations than any of his hired hands. But was Martha's plan fair to the girl? Chapter 5, Revelations. The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later, while Rebecca was helping Samuel with the ranch books, she suddenly looked up from the ledger she was studying. Mr. McKinnon, can I ask you something? Of course. Mrs. McKinnon wants to adopt me, doesn't she? Samuel's pen froze over the page. What makes you say that? Little things. The way she talks about the future, the clothes she's been buying me, how she introduces me to people in town. Rebecca closed the ledger carefully. She's a kind woman, and I'm grateful for everything you've both done. But I need you to know something. What's that? Rebecca was quiet for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. I wasn't entirely truthful about my circumstances when you bought me. Samuel set down his pen. Go on. My parents did die of fever. That part was true, but I wasn't just living rough on the streets afterward. She met his eyes. I was working for a man named Garrett Mills. He ran certain kinds of businesses in Galveston. Samuel's blood went cold. He'd heard of Mills, a man who controlled most of the illegal activities in the port city. What kind of work? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Nothing like what you're thinking, Rebecca said quickly. I was too young for that, but I kept his books, carried messages, watched for trouble. I was good with numbers, and I could move around the city without attracting attention. Why are you telling me this? Because Mrs. McKinnon deserves to know what kind of person she wants to adopt. And because Rebecca hesitated, because I think someone's been watching the ranch. Samuel's hand instinctively moved toward his gun. What do you mean? Yesterday, when I was working in the garden, I saw sunlight reflecting off something in the hills to the east, like someone was using a spyglass. And 2 days ago, I found horse tracks near the creek that don't match any of your horses. You think Mills sent someone after you? Maybe. Or maybe it's someone else entirely. But I learned a long time ago to pay attention when things don't feel right. Samuel stood up and walked to the window, scanning the hills Rebecca had mentioned. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I hoped I was wrong and because I was afraid you'd send me away if you knew the truth about my past. Samuel turned back to her. Rebecca, what you did to survive doesn't define who you are. But this Mills character, is he likely to come after you? I don't know. I never stole from him, never betrayed him, but he doesn't like loose ends. That evening, Samuel called his foreman, Tom Bradley, into his study. Tom had been with the ranch for 10 years and was one of the few men Samuel trusted completely. "I need you to set up a watch rotation," Samuel said. "Someone's been scouting the ranch." Tom's weathered face grew serious. "You think we're going to have trouble? I think we need to be prepared for it." As Tom left to organize the men, Samuel found Martha in the kitchen preparing supper. He told her about his conversation with Rebecca, watching his wife's face carefully as he spoke. Martha listened in silence, her hands never pausing in their work. When he finished, she set down her wooden spoon and turned to face him. "Does this change how you feel about her?" she asked. "No, if anything, it makes me respect her more. She survived things that would have broken most adults." "Then it doesn't change how I feel either." Martha's voice was firm. "That child has been through enough. If trouble's coming, we'll face it together." Samuel felt a surge of love for his wife. Despite her desperate desire for a child, Martha's first concern was Rebecca's welfare. "There's something else," he said. "I don't think we should push the adoption idea right now. Rebecca needs to know she has choices, not feel like she's being passed from one owner to another." Martha's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "You're right. But Samuel, I need you to know that girl has brought something back to life in me that I thought was dead forever. I know. She's done the same for me." The attack came 3 nights later just before dawn. Rebecca, who had taken to sleeping lightly, heard the horses before anyone else. She slipped from her bed and peered out her window to see 6 men riding hard toward the ranch house. She ran to Samuel and Martha's room, pounding on the door. "Mr. McKinnon, riders coming fast." Samuel was up instantly, grabbing his rifle from beside the bed. "How many?" "6 that I could see." Martha was already pulling on her robe. "Is it Mills?" "I don't know, but we need to get ready." Samuel sent Martha to wake the ranch hands while he and Rebecca took positions at the front windows. In the gray pre-dawn light, they could see the riders spreading out to surround the house. "Rebecca," Samuel said quietly, "there's a shotgun in the kitchen pantry. You know how to use one." "Yes, sir." "Good. Watch the back door." As Rebecca moved to the kitchen, she caught sight of the lead rider's face in the growing light, her stomach clenched with recognition. It was Jake Winters, the hand Samuel had fired, and behind him rode several men she recognized from her time in Galveston. The attack began with a shout from Jake. "McKinnon, send out the girl and nobody gets hurt." Samuel's voice rang out from the front window. "You're trespassing on my land. Clear out while you still can. This ain't about you, old man. It's about the girl. She stole something that belongs to my employer." Rebecca felt a chill of fear. She had taken something from Mills before she left Galveston, a small ledger that contained records of his payments to various city officials. She'd thought of it as insurance, something to keep her safe if Mills ever came after her. But apparently, he wanted it back badly enough to send men across half of Texas. The first shots came from the east side of the house where 2 of Mills's men were trying to force their way into the barn. Tom Bradley and another ranch hand returned. Fire from the barn loft and the attackers fell back. Rebecca heard glass breaking in the front room and knew someone was trying to get in through a window. She left her position at the back door and crept toward the sound. Shotgun ready. She found one of Mills's men halfway through the parlor window, struggling to get his legs inside. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She fired once and the man tumbled back outside with a scream. "Rebecca." Martha's voice came from upstairs. "Are you all right?" "Fine," Rebecca called back, reloading the shotgun.